Oh, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. And today we're going to continue and hopefully finally finish this book, Anarchy Works by Peter Gelderloo. It's been really fantastic. It's been awesome, educational, insightful, great resourceful. It's just awesome all around. Highly suggest you check it out. Anarchy.works. It's free. Just go look it up. Um, Great stuff. So I'm going to finish it today. Hopefully, this is the last two sections of the book. All right. I think there's like a little, yeah, it works when I make it work. I don't know if that counts as, maybe we do it tomorrow. But this, I will count this as finishing the book. But the rest is extra. Okay. So let's jump into it. Other problems we can't foresee. Anarchist societies will face problems we cannot possibly foresee now, just as they will encounter difficulties we might predict but be unable to solve without the historical laboratory revolution provides. But one of the many areas of the state is the neurotic supposition that society is perfectible, that it is possible to craft blueprints that provide for all problems before they occur. Indeed. And that's something that's been hard for me to internalize as well, but something that I've seen as really important to communicating, you know, um, the power of anarchy to other people, right? Because I realized that a lot of people they're like, "Oh, what about this? What about this? What about that?" But in reality, what happens is that when we try to set everything up, right, and solve all the future's problems, we actually create more problems, right? Just go look at the Constitution, right? There's a whole bunch of people who just, what does the Constitution say? What is the Constitution? It, it defeats the whole purpose, right? Like they made that constitutions as meant to be a living document as you update on the as time goes to keep up with the current you know ideologies and things like that. But of course, the biggest problem with the Constitution in America, at least, is that it was never really designed for everybody, right? It was only designed for those who had, the power, who and stuff like that at the time. And yeah, they may have thought, oh yeah, in the future, maybe black people will be free, or maybe women. I don't even think they thought about women, unfortunately. But but the point is that it's supposed to be a living document, right? But even today, even though they make a little amendments here and there, it's rarely ever anything substantial. It doesn't really. There's always my Second Amendment, rather than realizing that Second Amendment was created in a time where you didn't have like mass killing devices that can kill 30 people at the flick of a trigger. They I don't think they thought of that as keeping your arms, right? It's whatever it says. So all that to say, like, the idea that we can solve all the problems by creating something that will solve for this case and solve for that case now is utterly unrealistic. It doesn't even work with our current system. Why would it work in a system where we don't even want to force people to follow rules that they don't think is relevant or good for them? Like, this is the whole point of anarchism. So yeah, I love this. um Favoring laws over case by case evaluation and common sense, maintaining a standing army, granting the police emergency powers on a permanent basis. All of these stem from the paranoia of statism, indeed, right? Because statism, the whole point is to maintain the state, right? Even the police, right? Their job is not to protect the people, it's to protect the state. And you can go look this up, right? They actually don't have a legal, requirement to protect people. It's to protect property or the state or whatever, right? So it's really concerning that people have this idea that we need to follow the laws. What does the law say? Because the law half the time is not good. It's not moral, or it might be wrong, or it might be out of date, or any of these other things. um and of course, this whole standing army thing, oh, disgusting, right? That and it's just sad how far down the rabbit hole we are, how far down the, not even a rabbit hole, the hell hole, the Leviathan hole, the Leviathan's gullet that we are today. We cannot tie down the contingencies of life in a blueprint, nor should we. In an anarchist society, we would have to invent entirely new solutions for wholly unpredictable problems. Indeed. Indeed. Should we earn the opportunity, we will do so with joy, getting our hands dirty in the complexities of life, realizing our vast potential and reaching new levels of growth and maturity. We need never again surrender the power to solve our own problems in cooperation with those around us. Amazing. Beautiful, beautiful stuff, man. Making anarchy work. There are a million ways to go about attacking the interconnected structures of power and oppression and creating anarchy. Only you can decide which path to take. Only you can decide. It's important to not let your efforts be diverted into any of the channels that are built into the system to recuperate and neutralize resistance, such as requesting change from a political party rather than creating it yourself, or allowing your efforts and creations to become commodities, products, or fashions. Let's talk about that real quick. All right. I know I want to, yeah, we still have time to talk a little bit. This is such a huge freaking problem today, right? This idea that, oh, you can't be too radical. You gotta go do what go vote and all this other stuff. Now I vote still. It's like I like what FD says, like washing your hands. It's a small thing, small action. It can help um in the long run, right? Or it can help possibly, maybe, right? In the off chance that it does help, it helps to wash your hands, right? Um, However, that's not going to solve the problem, right? Washing your hands is not the same thing as making sure your environment is clear of of viruses and things like that and diseases. How do you do that? You have to sanitize your workplace or whatever that's your environment, right? You can't just depend on just washing your hands. Similarly, that's a whole metaphor here, right? Like you can't just vote and just expect that to solve the problem. You have to sanitize the environment. You have to say, okay, what are the major germs? What are the major cancer causing agents? What are the major problems in our society that is creating these issues, right? And then meet those, right? Stop that. The washing your hands, that's just the cherry on top, right? Um, Same thing for when you come up with a cool idea or whatever. Like I hate that a lot of smart people think that they're solving the world's problems by creating another startup or nonprofit. That's not solving the problem, because this is what happens. And this is true with even a nonprofit, right? You figure out how to commoditize it. Or you figure out, okay, maybe I do have a good idea, maybe it is useful, but then you start thinking about, oh, now how can I make money off of this, right? And so the a lot of problems, a lot of the hard problems of our society may not be profitable, or the only way in which they do become profitable is if you do some unethical stuff, right? Like the housing issue, it's not a profitability problem. Like it's not, you know, the reason why it's not being solved, right? Is not because is because it's not something that you can sell easily. Like you can't sell houses to impoverished people. Like that's the whole point. They don't have the money to buy a house, right? And so many people might be thinking of solving the problem, like, oh, maybe we can make houses cheaper, and all this other stuff. But that's not the problem. There's plenty of cheap housing. There's plenty of affordable housing, or there could be, right? But the problem is the politics. The problem is the people who want more power, who want more profit. And so they can buy a whole bunch of real estate, a whole bunch of property, and then sell it at a premium, right? It's a better strategy. It's a better strategy for them to buy a whole bunch of land, a whole bunch of housing, whatever, and only rent out a portion of that. This is what they do. Go look at it. Like they might buy, like, for instance, 20 houses in a neighborhood or in an area, and then rent out 10 of them, and the other 10 they keep they keep in their back, like they keep um empty. And what that does is it drives the price up because it's supply and demand, right? If you can take up the supply, but there's a lot of demand, and you can say, oh, now there's less supply, you can get more money from that, right? So a lot of our problems are coming from this idea that we can, just create a business to solve the ideas. And we have this really, really terrible, poisonous, stupid idea that capitalism has brought the most people out of poverty, when in reality it has not. It has created more poverty than ever before. And this is crazy, because people won't even believe me when I say it. But you can look it up. There's a whole research for this. I'll put it in the comments. I might still have it up. Yeah, because I was reading through it. and it's pretty goddamn damning, right? Let me share my share this tab instead. Look at this: capitalism and extreme poverty, a global analysis of real wages, human height, and mortality. I think there's another one, from this that's similar in this vein as well. But this one's basically saying like they were actually able to track through a bunch of data that shows when poverty, when capitalism came, in many of these places, things like mortality and human height has went down, right? Or rather, human heights went down, mortalities went up, right? Um, and you can see like in a lot of places, capitalism has destroyed people's ways of life, right? And then it wasn't until like the late 1800s or 1900s, yeah, 1900s, the early 20th century, right, that you begin to see that turn around a little bit because you have really more socialistic property, or programs utilizing the gains from that, right? Um, it's not to say that capitalism has, and this is another thing too, right? People confuse capitalism with science, right? Like the progress of science was more of a socialistic, idea. And I say that not as a economic thing, but in terms of the fact that the whole point of science is for people to research things and put it out there in the public for people to freely get, right? You don't capitalize on science, right? You you do the research, other people come and look at your work and all this other stuff, and you benefit that way. One of the biggest things that has helped our mortality rate, um, and has helped, just increase humans in general, is like germ theory, a science, not any sort of capitalistic idea, right? So like there's so many of these elements about how we take for granted, a lot of the things going on today. And we say, oh, it's thanks to capitalism that we even have this stuff. But really, it's thanks to capitalism that this stuff is so terrible. It could be so much better. Anyways, but yeah, like if you think you have a good idea, you want to change the world, don't make a startup, don't make a nonprofit. Think about making a community. Think about making a co-op, right? Where you're building a product for people in a community, and you're teaching those people how to use that technology to sustain themselves. So they don't even need to make a profit in order to make it sustainable, right? What does that mean? For instance, with Uber is still not profitable. Uber is still not profitable. Think about that. It has one of the biggest impacts on life in the last 10 years or so. And it has helped a lot of people, right? But it's not profitable. Why? Because it is an unsustainable business model. Right? If they turned it into something that was localized so that the people in a specific area can decide for themselves, oh, I want to, use my vehicle, or even, use a public vehicle, right? And public vehicle meaning something that's owned by a lot of people rather than owned by one person, meaning a lot of people can come and, and give like pool their money to create this thing. Then you can that thing can persist on, like, the actual cost that it would take to drive it around and things like that. And if you constrain it to just a local area to say, okay, you want to go from here to here to here, whatever, that like micro, got a package coming in, my dog's gonna bark every time. But, goodness, sorry. But yeah, like, sorry. But yeah, you get my point, right? Like if you have a local area, you can decrease the cost and things like that. A lot of times, a lot of these costs are so huge because they're trying to scale and scale and scale and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But a lot of things are more sustainable if you keep it at a certain level, right? And there's people are starting to realize that now. But framing it in a capitalistic, framework or mindset just serves to stymie like that whole attempt. So yeah, let me let me stop talking. Just finish reading this book. Finish reading it. To free ourselves, we need to regain control over every aspect of our lives. Yes, our culture, our entertainment, our relationships, our housing and education and healthcare, the way we protect our communities and produce food, everything. 100%, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to do everything. The whole point is that the community can come together, right? Because there's always going to be in a group of 100 people or a couple hundred people or even 1,000 people, whatever. There's always going to be some people who want to do this, do that, whatever, right? And it doesn't mean you can't trade. You can still trade. You can still work with other people who have other sets of strengths and ideas and whatever from other cultures, but you don't have to capitalize on everything, right? Because when you capitalize, you limit the growth. You limit rather the healthy growth, right? You limit the amount of cooperation that can be had from it. You limit the pool of resources that everybody can have access to, and it just stymies the growth. And what I mean by growth is that growth of the people, right? The ability for you and I as an everyday person to become smarter, to become more connected, to become more empathetic, to become more, productive in the way that we want to produce, right? Not how some corporation wants us to produce things. So a lot of that, like, and that's what's funny too. Like a lot of the growth that we have today is mostly like this meta abstract, monetary financial growth rather than actual the growth of our everyday lives. And you can see this in, the lives of everyday people. Over the last 50 years, more and more people feel like they're not able to grow. They're not able to reskill. They're not able to, live a comfortable life. They're not able to get what they want to throughout their life. They're not able to live their dreams and everything like that. So a lot of people feel constrained in what we can do, what we can learn, what we can build, and all these other things. And that to me is one of the biggest proofs that the growth that capitalism does or caps for or whatever is just completely separate from what most of us actually want. Without getting isolated in single issue campaigns, figure out where your own passions and skills lie, what problems concern you and your community, and what you can do yourself, right? Yeah. This thing right here, single issue campaigns, because a lot of times people get, overly constrained to say, oh, this is the one thing that we have to care for. But in reality, if you care for this thing, that's cool, but work with other people that care for something else, right? Because that solidarity is what creates that power, is what creates more ability for everybody to come together to create to build that better future. At the same time, stay abreast of what others are doing so you can build mutually inspiring relationships of solidarity. Indeed, I should have just finished it, right? There may already be anti-authoritarian groups active in your area. You could also start your own group. One great thing about being an anarchist is you don't need permission. If there's no one you could possibly work with, perhaps you could be the next Robin Hood. That position has been vacant for far too long. Yes, an actual Robin Hood, not the goddamn app. All right. Think about actually, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Like I was trying to make a podcast about it the other day, but for some reason it got messed up. I had to do it again. Um, but I was just saying the other day, like it's so incredibly frustrating that we have these $1 million homes and stuff like that people are selling. They have like 9 bedrooms and 16 baths. It's weird they even put it like that, and 4,000 square acres of whatever square footage of property land or whatever, and nobody's there, right? The people that live there might only use it for a party house or second house or third house that's empty half the time or only has two people there living or whatever. Like you could turn that into a freaking, you know, um multi-family house. You can house multiple people there and turn it into a whole mini community, right? Imagine taking all these mansions that you might see and turning it into a mini community where people can garden, people can have their own servers, people can have their own, transport. People can learn how to do any sort of skills on this property and invite their friends and family all to live together in this area, right? And they can jump over to another property or have other people live in the other property. So every time you see a big mansion or whatever, it's actually a family or community living there rather than just some party house or some bullshit, right? Like, imagine how cool would it be to take all this dilapidated vacant land or these massive, properties with again nobody on them and giving it to people who actually need it, right? There's definitely a need for that these days. Or if that's too tall an order, start smaller with something like making graffiti, distributing literature, or running a small DIY project until you built up experience and confidence in your own abilities and met other people who want to work alongside you. Indeed, that's what I want to do right here, right? I want to start building my own DIY projects on like technology, on how to design, software and hardware that is actually ergonomic, that's actually ethical. You know, I've made another podcast talking about AI and how we should be able to design AI that is able to, do things like go, because a lot of these big corporations have like patent trolls, right? Where if a small person tries to patent something, this big corporation, if they like that thing, they will patent it first. So they're using massive resources to go and say, okay, what's patent pending? We see that. Okay, let's see what we have. Right? They actually have this where they farm out people to just make a whole bunch of stuff, to patent a whole bunch of stuff. And when they find somebody else's patent that's similar to that, they say, oh, it's this is just like what we have. Right? Therefore, this is not a real thing, and they would take that thing and and use it. Right? So instead, we can be creating AI that goes and fights back against these monopolies whenever they try to patent some new drug or new thing that's not actually helping anything, is just there to perpetuate their freaking IP. Instead, the AI can say, oh, here, everybody come, check out this patent that they're trying to take over. This should be free to the public. Here's what it does and everything like that. Here's what you can do to keep it open source or make it open source or whatever, make it open to the public or whatever. Like we can be using AI for that rather than using AI like to steal artists, usually indie artists too, and without consent, and then just profiting on that. Like it's we can be doing so much better, y'all. Anarchy thrives in the struggle. Well, let me drink. Before I go. Drink some water, stay lubricated. Okay. Anarchy thrives in the struggle against domination, and wherever oppression exists, resistance exists also. These struggles do not need to call themselves anarchists to be breeding grounds for subversion and freedom. What is important is that we support them and make them stronger. Yes, yes, yes. Capitalism and the state will not be destroyed if we consign ourselves to creating wonderful alternatives. Once upon a time, the world was full of wonderful alternatives, and the system knows quite well how to conquer and destroy these. That's a great point. I'm not gonna lie, because this is something that I tend to think about. It's like, oh, let me just create alternatives and then help have people just go to that instead. But the problem is that a lot of capitalism, again, the whole point is to capitalize, is to take somebody else's resources and capitalize on that. And they like to dress it up as like, oh, they weren't using it, or we wanted to show the better potential. Oh, we wanted to do this, that, and the other with it, or oh, they're in the way or whatever. It's just so sad. And what they really do is just destroy, that area, that they exploit the hell out of it, and it becomes, unusable. And then they try to move on to the next. So yeah, this is why you actually have to destroy the capitalistic system, um, as well as create alternatives. Whatever we create, we must be prepared to defend. Indeed. No one book is enough to explore all the possibilities of anarchist revolution. Here are several others you might find helpful. Nice. Crime Think, Recipes for Disaster, A Social Story, Direct Action, Anarchism and the Black Revolution, Living My Life, Incidents Anarchist. So yeah, this is a great list. Began a personal account. Oh, how it all began. Personal account. Western German. Urban Guerrilla. Do It Yourself. Hamburg for Changing the World. Oh, I might have to check that out. I like that. I need to learn more DIY stuff. Outlaw Woman, Memoir of the War Years. Wear an Image for the Future. A Greek Uprising in December. Beating Fascism, Anarchism, Anti-Fascism in a Theory and a Practice. This is very useful these days. Very useful. Call, appel in the original French. Nice. That you are going to write to share your experience with the world and expand our collective toolbox. Yeah, indeed. I'm trying to write some solo punk stories, but also I want to write like ideas of what the world could look like, and then like almost web fiction of how to get there. How we might be able to get there. So some ideas, kind of sharing this type of stuff. I was also thinking like there's a game called Half Earth, uh, or something like that, where that's like a based on the sociology, not sociology, socialism kind of aspect. But I want to make it like an anarchistic version of that game, because I feel like that game is a little bit too top down. I would like to make a bottom up version. where instead of it telling you, kind of what strategies are more or better than others, you can come together and put like ideas up there as to what is uh going to help change the world and stuff like that, and people can kind of crowdsource current technologies or techniques or all these sorts of things to inspire people and help kind of gamify that process. I think that'll be very interesting. So I might as well read this section. It works when we make it work. The many people who conspire to commit these rebel stories to paper and get them into your hands have been thoughtful enough to provide you with one parting example of anarchy: the book itself. Imagine the decentralized network, the harmonious chaos, the confluence of liberated desires that made it possible. Yeah, this was a great book. And again, I can only do this because it's free online, so that was awesome. With passion and determination, millions of people breathed life into the stories we present, and many of them struggled even past the point of certain defeat in the hopes that the utopias might inspire future generations. Hundreds of other people documented these worlds and kept them alive in our minds. And dozen more came together to edit, design, and illustrate the book. Even more collaborated with proofreading, printing, and distributing it. We have no boss, nor are we getting paid to do this. In fact, the book is priced at cost, and our goal in distributing it is not to make money, but to share it with you. Publishing is an enterprise we were supposed to lead to the professionals, and books were something we were supposed to buy and consume, not to make ourselves. But we forced ourselves the permission slip to pursue this project, and we hope to show that you can too. It can be tempting to present such ambitious projects as magically final products, leaving the reader to guess how we did it and reveling in the illusion ourselves. However, sometimes it's better to let an inopportune gust of wind blow in, sweep up the curtains, and reveal the machinations backstage. This book then proves to be no different from all the other examples illuminated herein, and that its creation was also a matter of constructive conflict. The collection of people immediately responsible for publishing it is not a homogeneous circle, but rather includes editorial groups with distinct modes of operation and a primary author for whom writing is an individual activity. Yeah, Peter Gelder has a lot of been reading his newsletters and blogs and tweets and all this other stuff. Because of differing needs and opinions, some people could not see this project through to its end, but as anarchists, they were free to leave the group when it was in their interest, and they had already affected the manuscript in good ways. Meanwhile, thanks to a flexibility of organization, the project could go forward. Awesome. As an individualist in this group, I learned and developed in ways I would not have had I been working in an authoritarian group. With a traditional publisher, I would be forced to concede whenever a disagreement arose. Not because I had been convinced of their point of view, but because they controlled more resources and could determine whether the book would make it to print or not. Exactly, right? How many times you have this idea, we hear this idea that, free speech or, the free market of ideas or whatever, when the reality you have this massive imbalance of power where certain ideas have, more power to decide what gets to be published or what gets to be talked about in a certain realms. Even like look at Twitter. People love to say, "Oh, Twitter was this thing that was biased towards the left. That was all this other things. It was against free speech." But the minute Elon Musk got in charge, he banned a whole bunch of leftist people. So now it is literally super biased towards the right. So if you're not in your little bubble of people that you trust, you're it's a freaking cesspool out there, right? And then what makes it even worse is that when they released like the Twitter files and all this other stuff about what Twitter was doing before, you actually see that they were more biased towards the right before. Even though they had banned a lot of people, they were banning people on different sides. They were keeping people that were highly sensational, right? Like libs of TikTok. They showed in the Twitter files, they said, "Oh, look, Twitter was talking about, they had like these tags on there like um blacklist or whatever, this, that, and the other." But on the very top of the page in like blocky red, it says do not touch, do not ban or whatever without talking to Twitter execs or something like that, right? Without talking about it. And so what that shows is that people at Twitter, most people at Twitter, were not actually able to affect this big ass, very right leaning organization because it was a high traffic, you know, project. It was a high traffic channel, and that was true for like a lot of these channels on the right, because they're so high traffic because they elicit so much conspiracy, they elicit so much sensationalism that they have this all this traffic and this popularity. And so a lot of these things against saying complaints against free speech and stuff like that is really just delusional. Right? A lot of it is just ignores the actual facts that's going on here, and it's really crazy. Anyways, but with our horizontal arrangement, I could receive criticism that I knew was intended to develop the book to its outermost potential, rather than just trying to make it sell better in a dumbed down market. Right? How many times have we seen that with all sorts of artists, right? Book writers as well as music artists, visual artists, and movies, all that stuff. Granted, publishing a book is not the most amazing achievement, and the weed paper thing oh, excuse me. The weed paper thing certainly isn't about to storm the Winter Palace, feisty as it is, but one of our most basic points is that anarchy is much more commonplace than we've led to believe. And hell, if we can make it work, so can you. I love that. Thank you. Also, like the other voices we've told here, the story of our storytelling contains its own weaknesses. We like to be the first to point them out. Unavoidably, a couple things are missing. One is a matter of realism. While making this book, we tried to not to romanticize the examples, though clearly these pages do not provide the space for a full analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of each side of revolution or social experiment. However, we wanted to give some indication of the abundance of complexities and difficulties lurking beneath the surface of every example of anarchy. But if the book is at all successful, if you readers do not simply say, oh, that's nice, anarchy is possible, and then go back to your lives, but instead you actually arm yourselves with this knowledge to plunge into the creation of an anarchist world, you will quickly discover for yourselves how difficult it is. Indeed. Yeah. Like I've been, becoming a part of this group in my city that's trying to do things like solve housing problems and all this other stuff, and it's real hard, man. It's real hard, but it's necessary, right? It's not as fabulous or as romantic as you would like it to be, but it is necessary, and there's a lot of high points there, a lot of low points, but there's a lot of high points, and I'm only just getting started, so I'm excited to get more into it. Check out my podcast for updates on that process. Anyways, the truth is sometimes anarchy doesn't work. Sometimes people don't learn how to cooperate, or a certain group never finds a way to share responsibilities, or in finding leaves an entire movement flat footed and unable to survive the grave pressures of the world around it. Yeah, that's real. Even some of the examples described in this book eventually fell apart due to their own internal failings. In other cases, a liberated community will be brutally repressed. A squatted social center creating a bubble of freedom from state and capital will be kicked out by the landlord, or the state will find some excuse to lock you up for participating in the struggle to create a new world. That's real. I've seen it happen, and it's really sad, but it's necessary, right? Like, if we want to live in a better world, we have to keep trying. We have to keep, fighting against this massive momentum that's in place today. Many people who fought for anarchy ended up dead and defeated, or simply demoralized, and their sacrifices will not be celebrated unless we write that history ourselves to learn from their failures and be inspired by what they won. Yes, beautifully said. This is a good thing to read right here. Like, all right, almost done. Another failing of this book is that we have not been able to romanticize examples enough. I'm afraid our meekly attempted objectivity omits how inspiring it feels to put anarchy into practice, despite all the difficulties, right? Yeah, when you overcome all these things, you actually get something working. It's like amazing. The stories here are real, on a level deeper than the footnotes that the chronicle of dates and names can express. Some of these stories I have lived myself, and they are wrapped up in the very writing of the book. The tedious satisfaction of organizing info shops and learning how to use consensus and defiance of the stifling psychological terrain of the United States was my inspiration for starting a book about what an anarchist world will actually look like. Though I still haven't finished that project, it led me to research what anarchy already had looked like. I like that. On a park bench in Berlin, taking a break from studying the autonomous movement of that city, I sketched an outline for this new book. And a couple weeks later in Christiania, I saw how an entire neighborhood living in anarchy seems perfectly ordinary. It occurred to me that I might encounter many more living histories if I looked. Over the next year, I went to a 75-year-old anarchist camp in the Netherlands and waded into a continuity of struggle in which the past does not imprison the present, but fertilizes it. Ooh, that's fire. That's amazing right there. In which the past does not imprison the present book fertilizes it. That's beautiful. I'm going to have to quote that somewhere. I stood in provincial Ukrainian towns that once overthrew authority and tried to imagine how they looked, gardened in an anarchist village in the mountains of Italy, and felt down to my very bones what the abolition of work means. As I traveled, I corresponded with one of my best friends as he went off to Oaxaca for 6 months and participated in the rebellion there. Appropriately enough, I finished my writing in a squat in Barcelona where I was stuck waiting trial and threatened with prison time after a police frame up. Mm. The park down the street used to be the city jail, but the anarchists tore it down in 1936. That's awesome. In 2007, our social center took it over in protest of our impending eviction, setting up a free store, putting out a selection of books from our library, telling stories to the children. Unexpectedly illegalized, I found my survival tied up with the network of liberated spaces throughout the city that house and nourish me, and these spaces in turn dependent on all of us fighting to create and defend them. The same is true of all the other histories we've seen. None of them owe their existence to spectators. These stories show that anarchy can work, but we have to build it ourselves. The courage and confidence we need to do this cannot be found in any book. They already belong to us. We only have to claim them. May these stories jump off their pages and into your hearts and find new life. Peter Gelderloo, Barcelona, December 2008. Awesome. Awesome. Such a wonderful book. It was a great joy reading it and learning and applying some of it, and I'm excited to try and apply more of it and, write my own and do my own, part of the process. So this was great. As always, let me know what you think about this entire book, about this section, whatever, and let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion on what we can do to build a better world. Um, this is such an amazing thing. So yeah, that's it there. I'll figure out which one of these books I'm gonna read next, and figure out how I'm gonna do it. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but we'll see. Have a great day. See ya, and bye bye.